All right. Hey, Zach, we're back.
Hey, we are back. Welcome to another episode of Talking Upstream, which is my favorite show that comes on Sundays, especially when I can't find anything else to watch except for Barry. If Barry's on, I watch that first, then I watch this.
I just watched that today, actually. It's very good.
Dude, what a great show. Anyway, if you know us, welcome back. If you don't know us, welcome. We are Some Nobodies. My name is Zach, and this over here is Dylan, and we are Some Nobodies. We're content creators. We're media makers. We're handshakers, if anything else. We just like to meet people. A lot of times people kind of come up to us and they ask us, not even personally, like, virtually, they'll walk up to us in a stream and they'll say, Hey, what are your guys' inspirations? What makes you tick? What do you think's funny?
Hey, Zach.
No.
Who are some of your inspirations?
I'll tell you.
I'm sorry. Should I have walked up to you?
Well, you just did in a stream, and I appreciate that. But no, I'm super excited about this. You know, the things that I think are absolutely the funniest things on the planet are the things that I try to mimic. And if people ask me at any given day, what are 3 of your favorite things that you watch all the time? And I'll say, easy. Mystery Science Theater 3000, Phineas and Ferb, and Doctor Who. And those are actually not jokes. I literally watch, if I can't think of something else to watch, I'll put on Mystery Science Theater. If I want to be thoroughly entertained, I'll put on a Phineas and Ferb, and that really just gets things going. Dylan, I was going to ask you what your inspirations are, but honestly, I do not care. Can you please introduce the guest of the week?
We've already had some of my inspirations on, so we'll do one of yours. So please welcome, this week we're joined by Josh Pruett. He's a writer, he's a storyboard artist, and he does a lot of other creative stuff for a lot of big time stuff. Thank you, Josh, for joining us.
Hey, Zach, hey, Dylan. Thanks for having me, gang.
Oh, thank you. Honestly, thank you for being here. And we talk about this every once in a while. It's like when we go to ask our favorite creators or just anyone to sit down with us and just be like, hey, how can we get a little bit better? You know, we kind of shoot for the high bar and then we wait for no responses. And then we shoot for like the middle bar and then we get a couple responses. Then we go, okay, I've seen this movie, Velocipaster. I could talk to this person. But one of my high bars, and it was so high that I was actually nervous to even reach out, was you, Mr. Pruitt. You actually, you're a friend of ours, the guy Tim B. Siegel, who's on Funny Science Fiction Podcast. And I reached out to him. I was like, hey, do you know any really cool science fiction? And he threw your name out, and I wrote back. I was like, no, I can't. That's above my pay grade. I can't do that. So yeah, I just want to start by saying thank you. Your time has so much value in my world. So
my pleasure.
For those who don't know who you are, for whatever reason, what's one of the things you're most proud of that you've kind of put out there?
Great question. I think most recently the thing that I'm gonna put on my gravestone is, as of this moment, and hopefully no one will take it away from me for a while, but I'm literally the only human being on Earth who's written both for Mystery Science Theater and for Doctor Who. So I very recently had my first Doctor Who. It was an audiobook that I wrote for Jack Rayner over at Big Finish Productions, an original full cast audiobook featuring Colin Baker, the Sixth Doctor, actually saying some of my dialogue. But yeah, kind of like mind-blowing to 8-year-old me, so that's my current claim to fame. And I think, I won an Emmy last year for co-writing Candace Against the Universe, which was a tremendous experience. But more, Mystery Science Theater and Doctor Who are like, those are the orbiting, satellites of my heart and soul. So it's been an extraordinary time.
Yeah, I'm gonna say as of right now, having you on this show is gonna go on my gravestone. Because honestly, when I need like my brain to kind of shut off, and you know, Dylan and I, we spend a lot of time just kind of coming up with stupid ideas or perfecting our ideas or writing out scripts or recording stuff. And there's times that I just need to shut my brain off. And there's nothing more satisfying to me than watching an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Because you
Can
get
relate.
Yeah, I mean, you get the quirkiness of watching a crappy movie that you kind of get to make fun of, but then you're also in the same room as your funniest friends who are getting to make fun of, you know. So if I can start the questions, I would like to start at Mystery Science Theater.
Sure.
Because that is so spectacularly interesting and funny to me. Now, when trying to write for that show, obviously, do they give you a movie to write for, or do you find a movie and go, okay, this is something that we can really get behind on this one?
Yeah. So the way it worked for me was I had this was through a connection on Phineas and Ferb, a friend of mine, Lauren Christ, who was our animatic editor, and she and I bonded on my first day on Phineas because she had a Mystery Science Theater, the movie poster, in her office, and so we'd been working together for years. And down the road, I didn't know it at the time, but she was friends with Jonah Ray. And Jonah was like, hey, we're actually looking for somebody who can help us out with some boards. And Lauren thought of me immediately. And I was like, oh, this is insane. You know, Joel Hodgson might be looking at some of my storyboards, but I got recruited to help out. This is on the Netflix season with Jonah.
Yeah.
And kind of in the midst of it, while I was helping out, I asked Joel if he'd be comfortable if I wrote some riffs, because at the back of my head, I've been, you know, my career has been kind of all over the place, but, you know, I started as a storyboard artist and I was moving into being a writer more and more as my career built. And I was like, yeah, I want to write for the show. That's been my dream since I was like 13 years old, probably. And I didn't think the show was ever going to come back. So it felt like a singular opportunity. And, you know, grateful to Joel forever because he said yes. And the way it worked is that it was all kind of satellite. So it was all satellite love. It was all like, you know, teleconferencing. So they actually, there's this piece of software that they had that I want to say was proprietary. And what they did is they sent us the movie and a time code. So I could go in, and it's kind of like what we know of as Zoom these days. But the idea is that I'm watching the movie and I would make my riffs and it would produce time code at every riff. And so they had already selected Beast of Hollow Mountain. That's the episode I wrote on. And Elliot Callan, who was the head writer at the time. So he was like, you know, we're in the Costco joke business. What he told all of us when he launched this over the phone was like, I want you to think in tonnage. I want you to think in, you know, I want a lot of jokes. Give me a lot of stuff, because then what they would do is they would, you know, select all the riffs that they thought were the best. And so I think they wanted 200 or 300 riffs. I think I sent them close to 700 because at that point in my career, I was writing full time. And I, you know, in animation, you know, what I learned coming up through feature animation and then working in TV, and specifically with Dan and Swampy on Phineas and into Milo Murphy, was, you know, you do alts. So you've got one joke and you know, then the whole writer's room comes in and everybody pitches on that joke. And so I was accustomed to writing alternate jokes. So there were times where I would see where there was a window, there was a good joke area in a scene, and I would pitch, you know, 3 or 4 jokes where I thought there was an opportunity to do so. So the timing was really amazing. It was really serendipitous because at that point I was a lot more confident in my abilities. But yeah, so that was kind of how it worked. And then we, you know, I didn't really see it again until the finished product, and they sent me a copy of the script, and I ended up getting like 30 or 35 riffs in the finished episode, which, you know, just sent me over the moon. I was just thrilled out of my mind.
Yeah, that show is it really just sculpted, I think, my humor when it comes to just watching things. I mean, I watch it, you know, with Joel and then Mike and all the old guys from like the mid 90s, and then, you know, I even I still rep my my Gizmonics when I do anything. Yeah, it's like I'm a legit fan of Mission.
I've still got my membership card. I still have my card. Yeah.
And then when I saw the Gauntlet come out, I was like, oh, right on, this is coming back. I mean, I even like I follow the Riff Tracks guys when they do live
Oh,
shows.
yeah, amazing.
And you know, and that's so cool to be able to write for, you know, those robots or even Jonah. Now, did you have any of those? I guess it's like your humor, right? So, did you have like specific people in mind when writing these jokes? Like, this would be a better Tom Servo joke, or is it just like, here's a joke, let them do it?
It's a great question because I'm like you. Like I grew up watching the show, so I very much credit and blame that team for kind of helping build my sense of humor and part of my personality. Whatever, take that for whatever it's worth. But like that, like so very much when I was writing, I was like, oh, this really felt like Crow to me. This really felt like Tom. And they had asked us not to actually attribute it because that, you know, they were going to do that part. But there were absolutely times where I would throw in like, this is probably Crow. And I didn't really know kind of the position Jonah was going to come in from. So I didn't want to be presumptuous. But, you know, my recollection of Joel as like the father figure and Mike as like the buddy who's kind of put upon by them, like the college roommate, like those are two very distinct vibes and dynamics, character dynamics. So I was really interested to see what they were going to build with Jonah. So that they kind of wanted us to be a little bit hands off, but as a fan, absolutely that was in my head.
Yeah, that to me, that would be like the hardest part. It's like, all right, well, I know Crow's humor, but I kind of just got to keep it open. That's interesting. And really, just thank you for being a part of that, because that show is continuously funny, and it has such a rewatchability factor, even for being a movie that you've already seen and jokes you've already heard. And I love all that. Now, when we hop over to other works that you've done, you know, some people come up and they ask Dylan, you know, like I said, Dylan, do you like Rick and Morty? And he's like, oh, absolutely. That is such a smart, clever show. And then they say, me, Zach, do you like Rick and Morty? And I say, no, I like Phineas and Ferb. Because to me, Phineas and Ferb was like, to me, that was like the predecessor to a Rick and Morty. It's like working with an intelligent fan base, not dumbing down to your audience at all,
For sure.
but also opening up such a wide like knowledge display of multiverse and aliens. So what was that like, working on a show that has kind of a big backing, different than Mystery Science Theater, but its own kind of following?
Yeah, it was an extraordinary thing. Like I had just come off of 8 years over at DreamWorks Feature. I started there as an intern and then worked in production, like on Shrek the Third and Over the Hedge, before moving into storyboarding. And so I was storyboard artist and writer for about 5 years. And when my contract ended and needed to find work, I ended up applying for a job on Lego Movie, the original. And on Phineas. And this is the only time this happened in my life, but I got 2 job offers in the same week. And I ended up picking Phineas and Ferb because I was going to get writing credit. And a lot of my experience at DreamWorks was that I was doing a lot of writing, but not getting credited for that work. And so I was like, okay, I need to take my career kind of by both hands and need to steer this sucker a little bit. And you know, saying yes to Phineas was, you know, it kind of changed the trajectory of my career. I came in the beginning of season 4, so the show was already really well established. But I think one of my favorite things about writing for the show is that I discovered what I didn't notice upon watching was that the show is really about Doof and Candace. And the boys, they don't really change. And what I realized over time is that it's very much like a Ferris Bueller situation. And Dan and Swampy have talked about how Ferris certainly was an influence on the show. But, you know, Ferris, it's not really Ferris's story, it's Cameron's story. And so, you know, Ferris's sister, too, it's like, it's more her story. She changes. She starts to take it easy and let go. And so on Phineas and Ferb, it's like, it's really Candace who's dealing with some issue that she's invented. And then Doof also, right? Doof's creating a problem for himself. And so early on in the show, I realized, oh my gosh, like, they're the real gift to write for. The boys are great. They're a lot of fun, but they don't change or evolve. They don't really have problems. And so, you know, being able to write for Doof and Candace was an absolute gift. And Phineas and Ferb was one of the few shows at the time that was still what's called board driven. So shows like Family Guy, where actually Dan was there very early days, back in the beginning of Family Guy, Dan, our co-creator. You know, that's a script-driven show. And, you know, going back to things like, you know, Ren and Stimpy and the original SpongeBob, those are all board-driven. where the team of writers will provide two storyboard artists, storyboard artists, with an outline. And that outline will then get turned into, with dialogue and panels, will get turned into the full episode. So part of your responsibility as a storyboard artist is to write all the jokes for the episode. And when it's a script-driven show, you don't have that creative opportunity for collaboration. So that was one of the many gifts of being a part of Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah, I absolutely adore that show. And you're right, when you break it down, it's like the two boys, they don't really have arcs. They kind of provide
Correct.
the atmosphere for whatever Doofenshmirtz is going through. And I think it's really clever. I love any show that does not dumb down to their audience or doesn't really try to over explain things. Like that is a show that really teaches kids a lot about feelings and about math and science. And I think that's so interesting. And that's my kind of humor. Now, if we hop over to something like Doctor Who, and I saw, that you wrote for Doctor Who. Now, when having 50 years of Doctor Who behind you, like how do you come up with something that doctor has not gone through yet?
That was the bear of it, and I kind of grabbed it with hi, kitty. I grabbed it kind of with.
I'll be back in a second.
Yeah, no worries. I kind of grabbed it with both hands. The position I was in, I had befriended Jack Rayner, our producer, on the box set's called Water Worlds, and it's available now on bigfinish.com. I was really interested in writing for Doctor Who. It was this, I always like to find mountains that I can climb, so I've got stuff to shoot for. So that was a mountain, and I never thought in a million years that I'd really get to do it. But my thought was, maybe I'll have a chance to write for a book or a video game or something, one of the tie-ins. And so I started just following people online who were doing that sort of work, so I could kind of wrap my head around what their trajectory was as creators, as writers. And so I found Jack Rayner, who'd been writing for Big Finish and been writing Doctor Who books for about 20 years at that point, plus. And, she really made a name for herself by writing great stories for the Sixth Doctor and really giving him opportunities to be as extraordinary as everyone believed he could be, and give him the kind of stories that were worthy of Colin Baker's talent and performance ability. And when I went looking for her and found her icon on Twitter, her profile pic was Vanessa from Phineas and Ferb. And so that's how we ended up connecting. So it became like a mutual admiration society. So yeah, very much Phineas actually led me to Mystery Science Theater and to Doctor Who. So it was kind of extraordinary. Dan put a thing on his TikTok recently where he took credit for it. And I was like, hey, more power to you, man. Give you full credit for that, for sure. But to your question, there's a long way around. But it's on this Waterworld box set, I'm buffeted by almost 50 years of Doctor Who experience between Jack Rayner and the author of the third story, Maelstrom, by Jonathan Morris. And I mean, they've been at this forever. They are the best. And so for me, I was like, this might be the only time I get the chance to play in this universe. What am I going to do? And I actually started without meaning to, I started with an idea that I'd had since I was 12, spoiler alert, where it's like a werewolf story where the city itself has the ability to transform. And so I was like, this is cool. I've never seen this in Doctor Who. How would I do this in an audiobook? And then what I did is I kind of took what I considered classic Who and new Who, modern Who, those elements, and kind of mashed them together. So I took kind of the humor and the heart from the modern series, and I took kind of the shape and the structure and the monsters from old Who, and I tried to put that together. We also have a brand new companion played by Ruth Madeley, and she is actually our first wheelchair user companion. So there's some wonderful opportunities there to like throw somebody else in and out of the TARDIS, who's got a different viewpoint on how adventuring through time and space would look and feel like. But really, it was a kitchen sink process for me. It was very much like, I want to give Colin Baker some great self-righteous monologues. I want to pair them with people who might be grumpier than the Sixth Doctor. I want Mel, Bonnie Langford's wonderful in the box set. I want Mel and Hebe to like butt heads a little bit, right? Get those two companions, give them different points of view about the new world that they're in. Monsters. I wanted great monsters. My monsters are called the Shiga, and they're pretty much, walking mouths of teeth on two legs.
Nice.
And it takes place 2 billion years ago on the moon, when the moon was covered in water. Because we had a news article broke like fall of 2020 while I was writing this, where they discovered evidence that, at one point there was some sort of water on the moon. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is a great opportunity where there's a little bit of science, underneath that wonderful fantasy sci-fi that Doctor Who gives us. Writing interior TARDIS the first time, I got choked up. Absolutely.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, when I was looking back, obviously I've been a fan of yours for a while, and then looking back, it's like, man, this guy's worked on literally everything I would like to put my hands on. But so, all right, taking off my fanboy hat here for a second, put on a creative hat.
You don't have to, Zach. You don't have to.
Yeah.
Well, I actually want to ask questions that's going to make me better, and not just, you want to be my friend or what? So like Dylan and I, we have a lot of ideas. We have a lot of things, and we kind of grew up in slightly different paths, but we've always kind of held on to weird concepts. Can you talk a little bit about how you went from just having like weird ideas to actually deciding I want to be a writer or a creator? How did that work?
Great question. So a bit of a long way round. And I think in my experience, I've discovered that, right, everyone has very different circuitous paths, right, to how they get to what we consider, oh, they've landed. And, for my money, I haven't landed yet, guys. Like I said, there's still mountains out there that I want to climb, that I'm trying to climb right now. So I feel like that's part of it, is that there is a piece of this process, which is like you move the goalpost for yourself. You get there, you finish that race, and then find the next one so you can keep going. So for me, it started as drawing. So when I was a kid, I was drawing all the time. And I thought initially I wanted to be a comic book artist. I loved comics. And then I really wanted to get into visual effects. Like there was an artist named Crash McCreary who was a concept designer for Stan Winston. Mm-hmm. And I saw his designs for the Cathoga from The Relic and his Jurassic Park designs. And I was like, oh, God, I want to draw monsters for a living. And then Jurassic Park came out and Toy Story came out like two years later. And I was like, oh, you know what? Storyboards kind of combine my interest in writing and storytelling with drawing. And so that's kind of where it all got started. And I ended up at Cal State Fullerton and, pursuing an animation degree at that point. But all throughout, I was writing short stories. So where it kind of kicked off was like doing short stories and kind of, hand photocopied zines that we took to Comic-Con to sell. And realizing that, okay, this sounds so ridiculous. But when I had to pick a degree, I ended up picking art because I thought, oh, that's a trade that I can learn. Based on all my research when I was looking at being a writer, all of it was like ass in the chair. Mm-hmm. That's what everybody said. So I was like, well, I'll get an art degree instead. that'll be more practical. Then I can get a job in the arts. But that it worked out okay for a bit. But the idea was, okay, like I want to use my art to support my storytelling. And because very much, it's like if you've got a poster, if you've got an image, it's a lot more arresting and gets people's attention a lot faster. And I think what I've realized is that, drawing is not necessarily my superpower, but I can use it as a hook. I can use it to help people. And one of the things that I've realized is that part of this journey is figuring out how you can be in service to others. And so I've realized that, as an artist, I can actually help other people with their vision. And that's something that, I feel like has really helped me get to that next level kind of over and over again. And, helping each other out, helping friends out, and kind of looking at it as a collaborative thing. And you know, like we're all in it together. Like, I know it sounds a little kumbaya, but it's proven itself out over and over again. It's also really fun. And so I think when it comes to like my own goals as a storyteller, it really was about like, I want to make stuff and show it to people. I want to do things, you know? So that's kind of what led to like, you know, writing my first book. And it's like, I'm still trying to write that thing, but it gave me the confidence to, for instance, when Scott Peterson and he was the story editor on Phineas, there was an opportunity to novelize Jungle Book. And the idea was, you know, there's not a lot of dough, but if we do it together, it's a great way to establish ourselves in that marketplace. And so what we ended up doing, we split the novel in half. But I never would have had the confidence to do it if I hadn't written that novel 4 years previous. So at the time, I was bummed because it was like, okay, I've sat down, I figured out how to write my first book. I haven't sold it. I'm a loser. This is terrible. And instead, it's like, no. Like that gave me the confidence to do this next thing. And because of Jungle Book adaptation, Scott and I then were in a position to pitch our original novel, Shipwreckers. And so that's how we were able to set that up at Disney Hyperion.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some of it is, I'm rambling a little bit, so forgive me, Zach. But some of it is as you are strategizing your own career, you know, all of these steps build on each other. And I think the key is to try to not hamper your ambition, but to be specific and go, yeah, of course I want this. You know, of course I would love to beat Spielberg tomorrow. You know, of course I would love to have my own show. But the reality is, where can you find creative satisfaction and then build a library, you know, to build a career? So for me, that's where it ended up. That's how I've been able to establish myself, is diversifying within that and then going, oh no, this is my next goal. Can I meet this next goal?
When it comes to like ideas, would you say that you kind of someone that has like just a lot of ideas all at once, or do you kind of just sit down and just focus on something and be like, all right, I got to churn out some ideas? What's your creative process like? How do things hit you?
I get them all the time. I get them, you know, often when I'm, you know, driving. I have this weird thing where I'm often getting them where I'm trying to go wash my hands. Like it's the weirdest thing, like getting up and leaving the desk, right? So it's that thing of like you're in the shower, you're driving, your brain's occupied. And so I catch stuff with my phone when I'm driving. And my wife, Amanda, will attest to this. I'll be like, honey, can you text me this really quick? And she'll text me whatever random idea I just had. And then like for me, it's about, you know, you're trying to catch the fun of it as early as you can. And so like sometimes I'll start like a Google Doc. So I'll use Chrome on Google Drive, and this things I kind of will tell my students. I teach a class at the CG Master Academy that's about development. And one of the things I say is like, you know, if you use Chrome and get on Google Drive, there is a talk to text option, speech to text option. And so oftentimes I'll find myself like, if I talk it out, I don't have to worry about the blank page. So then I have something I can edit after the fact.
Yeah, that's smart.
So that way you're not frozen. You know, you skip that step.
Yeah.
And then I think, and then for me, as far as like the thing I struggle with is what to work on when. And I got great advice. I remember years ago, John August, the screenwriter, he worked on Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, or Charlie and the Chocolate Factory with Burton, and among other things. But he had this really great blog. I think he still does. But, you know, he said, when you're trying to pick what to do, write the one with the best ending first. And so I thought that was really great advice because it made you think about what you were doing and why. Because I think we all have ideas, but, you know, I think we've all read and watched things where, you know, there is no ending and it's boring and the thing fizzles out. And so I love the idea that even while we're working on our personal projects, having this standard of being like, well, you know, which one's got a good ending? Yeah, you got a good character. Great. Yeah, you've got a great set piece. Okay, awesome. But what's the ending? And so the first book that I wrote, it's a Greek mythology book, and like I said, I'm still trying to sell that one. But that one had the corker of an ending. That one was like, oh, this is great. All these elements were going to come together in a satisfying way. That's the one I got to write. And when we were pitching Shipwreckers, it was the same thing. The ending was one of the first things that I pitched to Scott. And I had an imagery, and there was a character who was going to make a strong choice and come out of their shell and grow. And I was like, no, that's the one we got to pitch, because it builds to something, that orchestra is building to that climax so that it's satisfying. So that's really where I try to put my energies, because it's easy to get distracted. I really struggle with like, well, this is more marketable, but this is what my heart wants, and I think the reality is we're really defined by the things that we finish. So shorter projects, or projects that, they seem more ready than something else, or, I have a lot of students who are like, I want to do this 18-part serial. And it's like, okay, we'll do the first one. You might decide you don't even care that much about the rest of it. I always think about like Lucas, like looking at that initial outline that he had in 1974, 73, and going, oh, this is the exciting bit. Even by his own estimation, right? For all of our many feelings about Star Wars, it's like, even as a young writer, post-American Graffiti, he's going, well, this seems the most dynamic. This thing with these rebels, that seems pretty gnarly. So let me start there. So I feel like, as we're making our own decisions, like, I think it's a great litmus test, and, and hopefully gets us to finishing things faster.
Yeah, I really like that, like focusing on the things that you can finish. I think that's one of those early lessons that you kind of pick up and you always kind of forget about. It's like,
oh yeah,
your brain is happier when you can achieve something. You have that cool power over yourself. It's like, I did that, I'm cool. Yeah, but then you kind of forget about it because you want to put the meat in there and you want to build the characters, and that is interesting. So you had Phineas and Ferb, you worked on Doctor Who, you've also had Mystery Science Theater. Is there like a project or like a company that you would like, if you had whatever you wanted to do, what's the property you would love to work on the most?
Oh man. Man, I've been so lucky so far. I would love to work in like the aliens space. I love aliens. And I love horror. So there's a lot of stuff there that I would have a blast in. I have a short story coming out. There's a Predator anthology coming in August called Eyes of the Demon, and I have a story in there where I did a little bit of a slasher riff on Predator, and I'm super excited for that to come out. But that was a great, hell of an opportunity. But I would love to work more in licensed material like that. I'm a huge Evil Dead fan. Evil Dead was the thing. Army of Darkness was the thing that kicked it off for me. John Carpenter, like those were. Like in my small universe, it's like Doctor Who and Mystery Science, and like John Carpenter and like Sam Raimi, like that. That's my whole like Josh's constellation. And those are the things I kind of come back to all the time. Like when I'm writing my own stuff, I've got like a book of short stories on Amazon called The Misery Company. And it's all darker stuff, darker sci-fi and horror. And like, I love working for all ages. Like, I adore it because I feel like it is that's one of the things I love about Doctor Who, is that it's for everybody. And I think it's a privilege and a fantastic challenge to write something that everyone can enjoy. I know it's really easy for people to go, oh yeah, things that are really broad, they can be really watered down. But I think on the flip side, there's things like Phineas, which are designed to be enjoyed by everybody and still be smart. We know it's possible, right? And so I love that I have an opportunity to kind of work in that space. But I think, my druthers, my personal stuff, I would love to do more in the horror space. I've got like an idea for a Thing TV series, like animated, that I would love to do. And the thing that I keep telling, other mentor Josh, telling, day-to-day Josh is going, dude, turn that into your own story. Like, do your own thing. Like I said, I loved Carpenter, and Assault on Precinct 13 is him, riffing like a jazz musician on Rio Bravo, and his Thing remake is, because he's, he loves that original movie. So I think often, a lot of our heroes, they get their start riffing on the things that they love. And I think that since that's our goal, right? Our goal is to make things that people love. I think that's a great place to start, right? Like that's a great place for us to, that's solid bedrock. Like I always get really I'm always surprised at people's kind of anti-nostalgia riff from the last 10 years or so, because it all comes from a position of love. That's why we do it. And so it's like, that's also what we're shooting for. So why is it bad when those things are connected? But yeah, that's a long answer to your question.
No, that's all that I ever want. They're just long answers to my questions. Now I talk all the time. I rarely let Dylan speak at all. Dylan, I think it is the time of the episode where you get to talk.
Sure. Okay. Actually, no, this is a perfect segue.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I'm kind of so I was curious looking over your filmography and what you've written, and even more so now talking about the fact that you enjoy writing horror.
Yeah.
Particularly the idea of a slasher predator story, which is, perfect. Do you do any sort of preparation or ritual to handle the code switch between working for a family-based everybody to a more horror-based specific target, especially a target that is, to say, a little more extreme than family stuff? Is there any talk on the your process of kind of getting into the mindset of one over the other?
That's a great question, Dylan. And I think the answer is, at least my instinct says, comedy and horror are very closely related.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a structural and there is a mechanical relationship to the two. So I think in some ways it's like I'm just switching out the cartridge, like the system is the same. So I'm still dealing with withholding. I'm still dealing with, a certain amount, different kinds of suspense, and, set up the joke, set up the foreshadowing, right? So there is absolutely a relationship there. And I think that's part of, for myself watching Army of Darkness and being like, oh my God, it can be both. How is it both? It's scary and funny. And then watching Evil Dead 2 and going, oh yeah, that's the greatest film of all time. Or watching something like The Host, the Korean film, the same director who did Parasite. It's like that movie in my head is more realistic than a drama, because that movie is funny, scary, sweet, heartfelt, and tragic. And that's what real life is. So when you're watching something that's just one genre, quote unquote, I always really struggle with it. So I am always like, no, there should be a little, a Tremors, I think, is a perfect movie. That is, I had the opportunity to chat a little bit with one of the co-creators of Tremors online, and they're tremendous people, and that was another one that was like, oh, it can be this, it can be scary and life affirming and funny. So I think when I'm switching gears, it's really, obviously some of it is an audience thing, and some of it is there's a different itch that I'm scratching, but there's more overlap than I think most people would think. And then because I'm also the guy, pitching monsters on those shows. So it's like one of the originals that I pitched on Phineas was Night of the Pharmacists. And I didn't know this at the time, but they were wanting to do zombies forever. Scott Peterson was actually born on Halloween. He's a huge horror buff. That's how he and I became friends. And I pitched this idea of you could do zombies if everyone turned into Doofenshmirtz. And we ended up getting George Romero to do a voice. It was one of the last things he did before he passed away. It was an unbelievable thing, but it never would have happened if I hadn't kind of stuck my neck out and been kind of obnoxious, but also been the horror fan. you know, bringing that to a comedy show for kids. And I mean, just the other writers, our directors and storyboard artists, they just hit it out of the park. There's some terrifying sequences in that thing, but it's also super sweet. There's so like, you know, there's amazing stuff between Isabella and Phineas in that episode that, you know, you could make the argument is an alternate universe story. There was actually a John Carpenter reference in there that we had to cut out, but there's that overlap, I think, is really interesting, and I've noticed it throughout my career. Like, I love kind of bouncing back and forth because both of them require something from the audience that's really specific. And like I said, I love playing in both worlds so much. And I think for a long time I was like, oh, I'll never get to, you know, like if I'm just in the kids space, no one's ever going to let me do the darker stuff, or vice versa. And so I think I'm really lucky right now because I'm kind of edging my way into the darker stuff. But I think that relationship is like, it seems intrinsic. It seems like it's already there. And what I've realized over time is that it's very much a part of who I am as a person. So it's like, it's part of what I automatically bring to the table.
Yeah, I really think that's an interesting way to look at it, because when you think about it, like comedy and horror are roughly the same thing. I mean, it is based on timing. It is asking the audience to give you a sound that their body does not want to make, which is either a laughter or a scream. And I think
an involuntary physical reaction.
Yeah, it's like I need to make a noise that I didn't expect to make. You know, and when I watch Mystery Science Theater, when I watch like Phineas and Ferb, and I get caught by that joke that just makes me like guffaw, you know, it's like, oh my god, that was just so well done.
Totally.
And thank you for that.
It doesn't take much for the pendulum to swing between the two, sometimes unintentionally.
Absolutely. I mean, again, like that's what I think Raimi is so brilliant at. I mean, there's stuff in the new Doctor Strange where I was beside myself with joy.
Yeah.
Like there are shots in there right from Darkman. There's shots in there like from right out of Army of Darkness. Like there's a moment with, spoiler alert, you know, there's a moment with our main character with the face of a dead guy giving the theme of the entire movie. And I'm like, that's perfect. Because if it comes from somebody handsome and rugged, and it's not Bruce, but if it comes from somebody who's handsome and rugged and the light shining behind them, that's only one level, right? It's really unsophisticated. But the idea of like, no, the dude's a zombie and he's telling you you've already been doing the right thing. I'm like, that's it. That's everything. Like that, again, that's more realistic than the dude, you know, and I'm a huge Superman fan, but that's then the light shining behind the good guy, right? Like give me more of that. Like that feels like I can relate to that.
Yeah, I totally understand. Okay, Mr. Pruitt, we obviously could speak to you all day about the things you've done at your creative process, how funny you are, but we obviously don't want to take up all of your time. So as much as I want to, if Dylan keeps texting me, stop wasting all of his time. Don't text me anymore, Dylan. I'm not going to answer. Anyway, so
you're like, I'm not.
Yeah, he's like, Zach, stop talking. But okay, so what we do on the show is we find our favorite creators and we just pitch a weird idea to them, something that we made up, and just try to see like, okay, if this were your idea, what would be the first couple steps you would take?
Cool.
And I think that I'm going to go first. I feel like Dylan's gone first a lot recently, and I am the failure of this season so far. Dylan's been crushing this.
You're not a failure. You're just a loser.
Okay, that's hurtful.
I feel so much better. I feel so much better.
Okay, so Mr. Pruitt, I had this idea for this new kind of like a nuclear submarine like engine, like a new kind of technology to push this sub. And on its very first day, the sub on its maiden voyage just disappears. No one knows what happened to it, whether it blew up or sank or anything. But it comes down to this one very studious HR person, and they don't want their business to go under. They don't want bad stuff. So they do a lot of due diligence, and they find out that what happened was the submarine shrunk. The engine somehow collapsed on itself, and it just made it so it shrunk. So when they went back there, because I had this stupid idea that between sunk and shrunk, it's just a solid HR. and I don't think the HR company gets a lot of a lot of pats on the back for what they do. So I had this dumb idea, which it started out actually as a weird horror movie where these kids found a tiny sub and they opened it and just like was just stinking. And I'm like, no,
because there's dead people in it.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of dead small people in there.
Yeah, small people. The movie. Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to work around this idea of people having this really crazy engine that just shrinks them down, and maybe something happens after that. But that's all I really have so far.
Okay. So it's a backdoor pilot for the relaunch of Sequest DSV. I'm in. I'm so in. That's where you headed, right, Zach?
No, that's exactly where I was going, because I really wanted to revive my Jonathan Brandis fan club, but I don't have a reason to right now.
Now there's an opportunity.
No, I can do it. All right, cool. Yeah, so that's my very loose premise as my pitch. And Dylan will most likely give you a very good pitch because he's very good at that kind of thing. So Dylan, go ahead, my friend.
So Dylan's going to pitch me his idea, and then we're going to pick one. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Preferably, yeah.
Okay.
We've had people choose both.
Yeah,
and we've had people choose neither.
That's funny.
The reason I started working on my actual pitches is because I got ripped apart for not pitching.
Seriously,
it was an educational moment, and I learned from it. And and the guest Dawn Thacker meant it in the best way possible.
I've never seen Dylan get dressed down by a human for no real reason whatsoever.
Amazing.
No, his hair was in a mohawk, so it was on brand.
Yeah, Dylan went first, and he got just such a dressing down. And I was like, well, here's my dumb premise.
I really like that guy's movie, too. Anyway.
So dressing down. Down. Okay.
Note to self: Zach likes it when Dylan gets dressed down.
Note to self. Okay.
I need to be taken down a peg every so often, so it's healthy for me.
So true.
Okay, so I'm just going to read this. After a particularly crazy leap year party, why not? An unassuming every person, main character, wakes up, and for some reason for them it's February 30th. Whatever that means, they interpret the day. For some reason, their mental clock is just like, it's the next day in February. Something's off. Nobody else seems to notice. The day progresses in a seemingly normal way, but then they notice some unusual stuff kind of going on. Sinister figures lurking around, like people repeating their sentences back, stuff like a lot of deja vu. Something weird is happening. He gets approached by eventually someone who seems to know what's happening, and he's brought into the fold as to why the shadowy governments of the world have collectively removed February 30th from everybody's memory. And a little bit of it leaks out, and that's why we have leap year.
So are you saying like something kind of gets stuck in that day?
My thought is that they use that they lock February 30th away to keep something out.
Oh.
I don't know exactly what. We're back to premise instead of pitch. But that's you don't want to come to the show with a fully complete pitch because it leaves us no room to go
you want it to be loose and exploratory.
No, it is time for Dylan to get ravaged. Give it to him. Give it to him, Josh.
Actually, I was thinking the opposite. I was thinking we go with Dylan's. But here's why. Here's why. Zach, you set yourself up, number one. Yeah. So number two is the high concept, I think, is really great on yours. But I think that Dylan's has there's a little bit more of a character at the core of it. So yes, you have the HR person, but it's like in my mind that getting the HR person involved in something that is top secret and extraordinary, I feel like we would all have to work to get that to happen. So not impossible. But you would then need to construct this is very deadly serious now. You would have to construct a way or rationale for why a pencil pusher would get involved in that.
Yeah, my initial idea was that they were partners. The head of HR was partners of the captain. They kind of created this business by themselves, but I didn't say that, and you're 100% right. Dylan is wrong, but he wins. So,
but I think the thing with Dylan's is like it's every man or woman out of their comfort zone, which is it's always a really great place to start. Like there's a bit I teach in my class where we break down Roger Thornhill, Cary Grant's character from North by Northwest. and there's this extraordinary bit of character introduction. It's like, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes at the very beginning of the movie, and you discover everything that you need to know about this character in the way that he's talking to his assistant. The fact that he has an assistant is like, step one, right? So there's all this wonderful building that's being done from a writing standpoint in that film. But the idea is you're trying to set up even somebody who is as successful and affluent as they are, they're a person. And so I think, I love that simple conceit of taking somebody and putting them into extraordinary circumstances.
Perfect. No, that's great feedback. Now I know for next time that mine needs to be about people and not a stinky submarine. Okay, so
I was in a band in high school called
It's
Stinky
both.
Submarine.
Yeah.
I know.
Was that a band? Was that a band?
Stinky
So many
Submarine? It
bands.
was my ska band. Yeah.
Yeah, my ska band.
My middle school ska band.
Stinky Scobmarine.
Dylan, I'm gonna mute you. Okay, so Mr. Pruitt. Now we took on Dylan's concept of the fact that there was a reason that the government took away February 30th. We're not really sure why yet.
Keep it locked up.
Yeah. Now I do like the idea of locking up a day. That's a cool concept. I've never heard of that before. Okay, so Mr. Pruitt, you're walking to wash your hands, and you have this idea that the government locked out February 30th, right? And you yell at your wife to text to have her text you this idea.
Amanda, please.
Yeah, Amanda, my hands are filthy. Text this to me, which is great. I yell that all the time, and my wife's not named Amanda, so I don't know why she does it. So we have this premise, and you come back to it. Now, what would you say is one of like the first things that you do? Now, I know that you work on your ending, but are you like a bullet point person? Are you an act structure person? What's like the first thing to kind of get this story going?
The first thing for me usually is like a little bit of stream of consciousness. So just like, either in the Google Drive or just sitting down and writing in a sketchbook. Or what the other thing that I like to do, because I want to give myself as many avenues in as possible, is brainstorming and asking myself questions about things that are similar. So like, is it time travel related? Is it, what are some other time, date, calendar stories that are similar, so that I have different jumping off points? Is it a conspiracy thriller? What else is that? Like, one of the things that, I was very much in college, I was very much educated on all those great behind the scenes on the Pixar DVDs, all those wonderful special editions. And one of the things I remember them talking about on Toy Story and on like Bug's Life back in the day was, brainstorming what's everything you think you know about bugs. And what like that as an exercise is, I've always found a hugely fruitful place to start, because you start with your assumptions. And then what happens is largely your assumptions probably are going to be similar to an audience's assumptions too, especially top of mind. So I try to engage that kind of early on in my process.
So I love that. One of the things that we also try to work on is, that you're spending a lot of time trying to figure out what this world is. You're trying to figure out the dynamics, the science of it. But one thing that we do try to wonder is, how do you decide what the medium for a project is? Like, you start out doing comic books. Like, a lot of our ideas could be comic books. They could also be shorts. They could also be reworked slightly into a series. So where in your story do you decide what this is going to be?
That's a great question. And I that's something I think about often. And I will try to kind of hold up whatever I'm working on to like that magnifying glass and really, really ask myself tough questions about it for that reason. So here's a couple of standard bearers that I've established for myself. If it's largely interior, okay. So if there's a lot of head stuff, if it's like, Herbert's Dune, if there's a lot of interpersonal and internal struggles, I'm going to say a book is the best way to tackle something like that. It doesn't mean it's the only way, but when I'm thinking about the project, that's the first thing I think of, like, is there a lot of physical behavior? Is there a lot of stuff that's going to be exciting to watch either on television or a film or even in a comic. Then kind of the next thing I decide, and comics can be exciting and books can be exciting too, but largely books are an internal process, right? So we're getting into characters' heads. It's like David Lynch makes very internal cerebral films, but he renders all those things visually, right? So that's kind of the first thing. Then I go, what can I accomplish? So I think about, like, okay, is this like the best version of this, the most successful version of this? Is it more than one part? And the way that I decide that is, television is a character medium, in my opinion, and film is a concept medium. Film is there's great characters in movies, obviously, right? But the idea is that you spend more time with characters in television. You have a chance in a serialized format to fall in love and stick with somebody for years on end. The evidence for this, for me, is procedural shows like NCIS and LA Law, all that stuff. The stories are largely the same. Not that they're not creative, but the structure is almost identical. What changes is whatever element they're dealing with that week and what the characters are going through. So folks are not necessarily watching these shows for the murders, the story. They're interested in the characters. So like a show like Psych, which I adore, I think the strength of Psych is the character relationships. That's why you come back. So on Phineas, the stories were the same shape. Boys are always going to do something. Duke's going to do something. Candace is going to try to stop the boys, right? So there's variations on a theme. But the fun is what the characters are doing. So if I'm thinking about something that is, very high concept, right, like this, and maybe not as character-based, maybe movie or graphic novel might be the best way to approach that. But if it's really character-based and there's a rich ensemble that I can't wait to give voices to, in my head, I'm going to go, that's probably a TV show or a serialized comic. Because I think part of our job as storytellers is thinking about what medium serves that story the best. And obviously, the different strokes, right? Like that's just how I approach it. But I think TV is very much a character medium that way, and feature I think is different.
Yeah, that does make a lot of sense because when it comes to a show or a series, you need that reason to come back next week. It's like, well, I would need to see how they're going. In the movie, it's like I just need to be in all of this.
And transported to this other world, and
Right, yeah. Now, when writing, do you have like a person's style that you like? I know we talked to some people that are, really into Save the Cat. And then, we talked to some people that are into like the bullet points and making sure that at Mark 10, there's this, at Mark 20, there's this. Are there any of those just loose guidelines that you kind of stick to, or do you change it up depending on what you're working on?
I tend to do it kind of buffet style. And, there's certain things, there's a lot of value in Joseph Campbell's Hero of 1,000 Faces. I think there's a lot of value in Blake Snyder's Save the Cat. I got stuff out of McKee's story. So I think there's stuff everywhere that I think you can absorb. But I think one of the things that I actually do in my class is I ask everybody to pick 25 classics, things they love, things that they've watched over and over again. 5 movies, 5 books, 5 comics, 5 TV series. And because if I can espouse the virtues of Kurosawa's Seven Samurai all day long, right? I could do a whole lecture series just based on that. But if you don't love it, it's not going to hold as much water. So I think often it's like, if I'm like, oh, this is the bomb book, this thing has all, like one of my favorite things is Russell T Davies' Writer's Tale, where it's emails that he shared with a writer at Doctor Who magazine. And it's like him at 2:00 in the morning figuring out what he's going to do with David Tennant's final episodes. And so it's an extraordinary book about the creative process for me. I also throw out Zen and the Art of Writing by Ray Bradbury and Stephen King's On Writing. Those are fantastic. But I think, like, for me, it's William Goldman's, get a character up a tree, throw rocks at him, get him down the tree at the end. And I look at 3-act structure, but really the thing that I take home from that is that 3-act structure is kind of a lie. It's really closer to 5 or 6 acts. If you break apart, your intro to the inciting incident, and if you have your epilogue post-climax, the numbers and the terminology, you get into this place where it's like semantics. And there's a lot of folks out there who kind of want to take advantage of people and brand, their particular approach to story. And I think I've tried to bottle it down to be like, if the best part of your story is at the beginning, you should probably rethink it. The best part of your story should probably be at the end. Things should probably get worse for your character. And whatever the hardest thing for them should also be at the end of the story. And if it's not, again, you might want to rethink what's going on. So, like, if you're using one of your favorite movies as a standard bearer, I feel like that's a good way to go. So if I'm thinking about, a horror project, or I'm thinking about this project, like, I'm going to go, oh, cool. Like, maybe I'm going to go back and watch Men in Black again. Or I'm going to go watch The Adjustment Bureau again.
Yeah.
What's the vibe? Does this feel like a Jason Bourne movie? Does this feel a little bit like a Matrix movie? And again, you're not trying to rip anything off. You're trying to find a way in. And I think often there's an instinct as creative people where we're like, I'm going to reinvent the wheel. This is going to be the most thoughtful and amazing science fiction ever. And, there's only 7 or 8 stories out there in the world. And I think we should use the stuff that inspires us. So I think, that's usually my other kind of initial step, is going like, oh, what else is this similar to? I wrote my master's thesis on Carpenter's Halloween when I was in college. I was getting my MA. And just about like how he used the frame, and how the Michael Myers isn't actually a character. He's a graphic shape that's being imposed into the widescreen frame. There's a lot of artfulness in that movie, and almost no blood, and everybody forgets that. But it's because of how well it's crafted. So it's like, if I'm going to be in a milieu of a science fiction movie that's tripping with people's heads and making this guy kind of question his sanity, like, I'm going to think about what else is like that I dig. Maybe I'm probably going to pop on a little bit of Lynch. I'm probably going to pop on like a little bit of Cronenberg, and kind of, fill the well creatively.
Dylan, we don't have a lot more time with Mr. Pruitt. Do you have any do you have any questions about
sorry,
how to
guys,
get this?
Sorry.
No, please.
No,
do not
no
apologize.
apology necessary.
No, absolutely not. Not even a lot of times, but sometimes we just kind of like, we're just like asking a lot of questions, and it's like, I feel bad about this, but sometimes like you just have this cool stream of thought like you do, Mr. Pruitt, and it really is engaging. And then I'm like, oh my God, we're out of time. I don't want to waste your time. So to keep you like active on a story that you want to engage in, but you don't really have a reason to, like, it's not a job. You're just like, I'm doing this for my own, just mental stability.
Yes.
Now, and you have this story about the February 30th. What would be one thing that you would want to solidify to make sure that you are just interested in this story? Would it be a character? Would it be a scene? Or would it be the ending itself?
It would be a character next.
All right.
So I definitely am a concept guy. So like and so for me, the character part is the discipline. The character part is where I need to sit down, hunker down, and I need to think about, who's our point of view. And I try not to be clinical about it, right? Because I think that's also the mistake of when we're adhering to somebody else's kind of formula for storytelling, is that I'm like, no, who do I want to spend time with? Who is going to be the least likely for success in the situation? And I think that anything that kind of gets you started creatively, where you're like, oh, like I think some of the beauty in Terminator that people kind of discount, because everyone wants T2 Linda Hamilton back just forever and ever and ever. But Waitress to Warrior Linda Hamilton is the most interesting Linda Hamilton. Like when she's, trying to get Reese off the goddamn ground and starts yelling at him like she's a fucking sergeant. Like, it rules. Like, it is exhilarating. And so I often go back to things like that where it's like, no, man, she's like a waitress and she got this crappy job, and like, you know, start with actual people, you know, and then I love funny characters. You know, when we were launched on this Doctor Who Hebe character, like, you know, they decided to make her funny, and I was like, yes. I was like, that is something I can do, because often an authentic reaction to an extraordinary situation is comedy. It's rejection, right? Like, again, clinically, it's a rejection of what's happening. And that's why I go back to something like Tremors or even Shaun of the Dead. I think a lot of folks mistake those movies for parody, or even American Werewolf in London, and they're not, because the stakes are always real. The characters are funny. So, like, I'm a huge Mel Brooks fan. I love Mel Brooks. But those movies are different because the situations and the stakes are often funny as well. And for me, that's the difference. And so, like, I'm going to jump in on character first. So, you know, give them friends, you know, not just, you know, your classic best friend, but that's who we talk to. Like, that's what's so funny often about these cliches, where we're like, we feel like handcuffed and we're like, well, I don't want to stereotype. The thing I always tell my students is, like, start with a stereotype and then evolve them. You know, go from there. Start with the thing that makes sense, that comes first in your series of assumptions, but then make them more interesting. Give them facets and interests. Another thing that I really love that's like a secret, secret tip is give them something they're passionate about. So as you're creating your characters, what do they love? Because we tend to be drawn to characters like that. And so often that's
like an enemy of the state when Will Smith likes his blender for no real reason.
Hey, anything Tony Scott does in his movie?
Oh, no, 100%.
Bro, Tony Scott.
Yeah.
Tony Scott.
Oh, all the way, forever. Dylan, do you have any more questions, Mr. Pruitt, before we let him loose?
You know, I think we kind of covered up most of the ground I had thought we were going to get to.
Well, that's good.
Yeah, well, I guess I'll save pages 5 through 18 for next time we have you on, Mr. Pruitt, because I literally could talk. Like,
Be happy to come back.
I really need you to know how much your time means to Dylan and I. Like, you know, we're trying. We always just like to, you know, keep creating, keep making stuff. But when we talk to somebody who's doing the things that we're doing, especially the people that fuels what we find is our own, you know, personality and our own sense of humor, which is, you know, Phineas and Ferb and Mystery Science Theater. It really just gives us. Well, I can't speak for Dylan, but it gives me such a like a beautiful sense of accomplishment, but also like a thrust to keep going.
Right on, man. I want to light fires. I want to light fires, Zach.
Yeah, and I really, really appreciate you and your time. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, it is beyond our pleasure. So thank you. Do you want to tell anybody what to watch? Is there anything that you're interested in watching right now that's really captivating you?
Oh gosh, great question. Oh man, I can tell you a couple things I'm super excited about.
Yeah.
So the gang that did Host, that was on Shudder, is a horror movie. Super amazing team. They've got a new movie coming out called Dash Cam. That's like another found footage style horror movie. It's coming out here in the States this weekend. Super jazzed about that. And oh gosh, what am I reading right now? I'm reading Stephen Graham Jones, My Heart is a Chainsaw. That's extraordinary. I'm also super jazzed on, there's a lot of horror novellas that are out there. And where like people are doing stuff that's like 100 sweet pages, and they get in, introduce the characters, get out. It's a great format. And then another guy I really love is Adam Cesar. He's got this book, Clown in a Cornfield, and it won the Stoker last year, I think.
Okay.
There's another guy who I really love, Jeff Strand. He's a friend, but he's an amazing horror and comedy guy. And he just won his first Stoker Award this year. Yeah, there's a lot out there. Gosh, there's so much.
Yeah.
And, you know, go check out Waterworlds on bigfinish.com.
Oh, yeah, awesome. We'll put as many links to all that stuff in the show notes as possible. So please find Mr. Pruitt on Twitter. Go watch Phineas and Ferb. Go watch Mr. Science Theater and understand what real humor is, and just giggle to yourself and know that there's beautiful people behind that. Dylan Terry, do you have anything to say for any of our friends watching, any of our fans that are following us, or anything at all?
Nah.
Oh my God, I love you. Okay, so until next time, folks, he has been Josh. He's been Dylan. I've been Zach. But you've been great. Have a great day, everybody. Drink some water.
Take it easy out there.
Bye.
Peace.
Thank you.